Well, good morning. Welcome back to GP Outdoors. And welcome to my little workshop. I'm not at the cabin today, I'm down in the city. But I got to clean that saw and talk about a few things, so I was hoping you'd hang around for a few minutes today. Cheers. I got to get this saw cleaned up today, but I also have to fix it. Yep, I broke my brand new 261. I'm pretty sure I know why. I also thought it might be a good time to talk about starting a firewood business. I think that if I had a dime for every comment I've had on this channel from folks saying, GP, you should start a firewood business. Make no mistake, if I could get up every morning, get my equipment and the tractor together, head off into the forest, fell trees, buck rounds, and split firewood and deliver them for folks, at least off into my golden years, if you want to call them that, I'd like nothing better. I can tell you, my entire career, I've never been a 9-to-5 guy. I've always, when I can, found ways to make money or do small things on the side to help bring in money for the family. And I encourage and I applaud folks that have the same drive. If you have the ability and you've got the opportunity and it makes sense, go for it. It's always helpful to bring in a little extra money, keep the family fed, so to speak. And I think it's an admirable trait. And where it makes sense, you got to go for it. If you have the wherewithal and you have the ability, get out there and do it, for sure. And I know that starting a firewood business is all the rage on YouTube the last year and a half or so. A lot of new channels popping up, a lot of guys or people building and starting and running firewood businesses. And I think it's a great opportunity. Again, if you've got the right ingredients for that recipe and everything makes sense. So let me tell you today why I'm not going to start a firewood business. For those that are new to the channel, I'm in Ontario, Canada. So anything I say today will of course be in Canadian dollars and be relevant to the laws, regulations, and requirements here in Ontario, which are probably going to be totally different or different to a large degree where you live. And that includes tax laws. So let's say I want to start a firewood business. First thing I'd probably do, take a look at the area that I'm living in or where I want to work. And if you're in Canada and you want some really good information, you can go on the StatsCan website. And if you're in the United States, take a look on your DOA website or your Department of Administration. And you can get similar or the same type of stats. Assuming you haven't grown up where you live right now, or you're fairly new to the area or you're not sure, any one of those websites will give you statistical data on how people, broken down to pretty much a county level, I believe, how people heat their homes. So that information will tell you, the size of your market. Assume for the argument that you want to start this business and you only want to go, do your deliveries within an hour of where your operation is. You can pull data that will tell you the population, I think down to about a county level. It'll tell you how many homes are there, and it will tell you how and what percentage of those homes are heated. It'll tell you how many homes or what the percentages of people that heat with wood, oil, propane, natural gas, and electricity. So that'll kind of give you an idea of the size of the market or the potential customer base you've got there. Now, of course, that also assumes that you've got a large enough property with a large enough complement of hardwoods on it, or you have some other cost-effective means of attaining enough hardwood every year to support whatever size or however many bush cord you think you might want to sell. Not sure if you folks noticed, but this chain was pretty much glued into that bar when I pulled it off. Saw on logs in negative 20 degrees Celsius weather is certainly a different experience. And I think I made a few rookie mistakes, which is why I broke the saw. So whether it's by experience and or statistics, I kind of know how big my market is. I'd grab a big coffee and I'd jump in the truck. And I'd get a pen and a pad of paper and I'd go for a drive. And I'd drive through all of the concession roads, county roads, and all the roads that intersect within and around that 1 hour radius of delivery from that house. And I'd take note of a couple of things. The first and most important thing, I think, is to figure out how much competition or supply there already is in that service territory. In my case, I have more than enough households that would need firewood, so that's kind of a check mark on the list. Most of the folks in my area heat with either a boiler or a wood stove, or in some cases they'll have two heat sources. They'll have a propane or an electric furnace, and they'd have wood stoves and or a boiler, so that they've got a backup, especially in the wintertime. So my market is reasonably big. But here's what changes the game for me a little bit. Oh, wow. Now I know why that chain was stuck in there. Wow. That's a lot of guck. Oh, and my oil holes are plugged as well, which I kind of figured was the case when I saw it starting to smoke. As you can see, I don't have some fancy tools. I use my little miniature screwdrivers. They kind of fit really nice within the gauge on this bar. So I'd go for a drive, and I'd start counting how many other folks are selling firewood in the area. And being that it's a rural area, virtually everybody, with the exception of two huge firewood operations very close to me, they all sell it out of the front yard of their homes. They all have big rural properties. There's usually a stand, but basically they all have a big wooden sign that says seasoned hardwood, $350 a bush cord, delivered, and a phone number. And there's a lot of them. There are a ton of people selling firewood. On my way home, within about 40 minutes of my cottage, only riding 2 county roads, I counted 9 people selling firewood, 2 of which are massive, massive operations. I mean big wood processors, huge front-end loaders, skid steers, and massive, huge piles of firewood, seasoning and ready to be sold. And to me, that's not a good indication. But either way, I'd also drive around and I'd stop at every single retail store or outlet, hardware store, convenience store, grocery store, gas station, and I'd check to see if anybody's already selling wood there. And sure enough, in my area, you'd be hard-pressed to find a single store or gas station that doesn't already have a couple of pallets full of firewood, whether it's bundled wood, selling by the face cord or the bush cord, already on the side of their properties. And remember, when you're selling at the side of a retail outlet or a grocery store, those folks want to cut. So in my area, a bundle of wood goes for about $10 Canadian. And these guys want $2 to $3 off of that $10. And as I said, there is not a single one within an hour of me that I found that wasn't already selling at least one, if not 2 vendors firewood on the side of the building. Usually sits right beside the ice. Again, not a good sign for me. Hey, but on a positive note, I have all the equipment to start the business. I've got a truck. It's not the right truck that would serve me long term. It's a half-ton, but it'd do the trick at the beginning. I've got a couple of chainsaws. I've got a splitter. I've got some area I could stack wood. Mind you, it wouldn't be covered, but I could put tarps over it to get it to season. And so I wouldn't have to put out any capital at the beginning because I'd have all that stuff. I wouldn't have to spend or invest, 10 grand in a nice splitter or purchase new equipment. I just have to maintain the stuff I have. So that's a good thing. However, as you folks know, I only have 4 acres. And in fact, a large portion of my forest are softwoods, not hardwoods. And I'm not sure about where you live, but nobody up here, and I mean nobody's, going to be buying softwood. They want seasoned hardwood. That's what they want to burn. And I don't have a lot of it. But let's assume I did have a property that was large enough that I could actually maintain it you know, cut 50, 100 more bush cord a year and still not, you know, for lack of better words, clear cut that forest over time. Here's where things get a little dicey or a little bit more interesting. So generally speaking, and I don't know a lot of depth on this because after I got down about one level, I stopped looking. But here in Ontario, even though I have property and I have trees, and I'm actually able to cut those trees down so long as I use them for my own purposes. As in, I'm splitting firewood to heat the house, keep my family warm. If I start cutting trees down and selling them commercially, that brings in a whole lot of administration and costs. I don't know exactly how much. I think some people refer to it as stumpage fees, but for the purpose of today, let's call it royalties. In other words, I have to pay the government these fees in order to cut that wood down and sell it commercially to other people. I have to enter into some kind of a forestry program, which means a certified arborist has to come out to the property, survey the property, and I think generally speaking, my understanding, and feel free to correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, he comes out, he basically could tell you how many trees you're allowed to cut every year and from where, and I believe there's an audit process involved, and you're required to stay within those limits. They come out and audit, and every year, or every so often, you have to pay the royalty to the government on those trees you cut down to sell. So now all of a sudden I got that cost, not to mention the headache of the administration of having to, you know, file paperwork and get audited every year. I'm not a big fan of that. So, option 2, I buy my firewood or I buy my logs. So I've definitely watched my fair share of YouTube channels, and there's a lot of good ones out there and a lot of guys out there that are running firewood businesses. But I'm not sure if it's just where I am in Ontario, but I see some of these folks will truck in logs or they'll purchase logs locally, and they get some pretty nice looking logs. Up here, when you buy logs, you basically get the logs that the mills don't want. So although on some channels you see they've got these nice, beautiful, long, straight logs that they get to cut up for firewood, that's not what comes on the truck. Because I know, because we've had neighbors that have bought them. Generally, a truckload is about 12 bush cord, and the going rate here for a truckload delivered to your property, so that's 12 bush cord delivered, is about $2,000 Canadian. That works out to about $165 or $167 a bush cord, which means that if I'm able to sell that bush cord for 350 bucks, I think generally that means that right off the top, my maximum profit, assuming no other costs, would be $180 a bush cord. So you take that $180 a bush cord and you realize that you have operating expenses as well as some capital expenses. You break a saw, you spend $1,000 getting a new one. You got to buy gas, maintenance for your truck, gas or fuel for your tractor, your splitter, your chainsaws, all of those good things. And you also need insurance. I'm sure you've got insurance on your truck, and you've probably got it on your house or your cabin. And underneath that policy, or on a separate policy, your tractor, your splitters, your chainsaws, all your equipment are all insured. However, that's personal insurance. Once you start using those assets to sell or for a business purpose, you're supposed to have commercial insurance. And if you've ever looked into the cost of commercial insurance, it's not cheap at all. It's a lot more expensive than your current personal insurance. So now you have to consider those additional costs, all because you want to sell firewood here. So I'm sure at some point, as you've started the business, you're going to be able to average your operating costs, so to speak. You know, the cost of maintenance for your truck, all of your equipment, fuel, oil, parts replacement. all of those good things, you'd eventually get to a point where you could average or estimate, based on how many bush cord a year you sell, how much it costs you per bush cord in operating costs. And this again is assuming that you haven't had to expend any capital in order to start the business. You've got the saws, you've got the splitter, you've got everything you need, and you just start out. And of course, don't forget, you can't go out in the forest, start cutting wood, and then sell it. Everything you cut this year, you probably won't be able to sell until next winter. So you're expending all of that fuel and gas and costs for the next year before you start being able to recover any revenue off of it. Remember, if you're going to shoot a little air in there, make sure you do it before you take your air filter off. And when you take your air filter off, he's nice and clean, of course, but you want to make sure that you're just using no more than about 20 psi on this nozzle, because it is paper. So hey, I know that was a long-winded answer, but I wanted to give you the details behind it, because I think, like I told you at the beginning of the video, if you have an opportunity to do something for yourself and make money at it, I say go for it, absolutely. And at the end of the day, if you're in a position where you're in a jurisdiction that's a little more friendly, you're not paying royalties, they are your trees, you've got a large enough property, and you're able to start that business and run it, especially if you've got most of the equipment you need, then I'd ask what's stopping you. Give it a shot. If nothing and all else fails, you've got a future supply of firewood for yourself. I'm certainly not an accountant, and I'm not giving you advice. But what I would offer is that it may make sense if you're in a jurisdiction or a state or a province or wherever you are, where your tax laws allow you to take the losses from one business and apply it to your tax burden on your other income. That might be a reason why you might want to start a firewood business on the side. By default, your business or your firewood business has to lose money the first year. I can't see any scenario where you're actually going to make a profit or a positive net profit the first year, simply based on the fact that you have to season that wood for at least a year before you sell it. So if you watched the video I put out about 3-4 days ago, you saw me and Bobby and Guy, we were sawing up or bucking up some logs outside a guy's woodshed. And you'll remember on the title of that video I said, the day started out better than it ended. Well, it wasn't just because my cameras all got frozen and I lost a lot of footage on that video, but it became very clear over a very short period of time that Bobby's saw was, well, in dire need of a sharpening. I think he grabbed the wrong husky when he had it over. But moreover, I actually threw a chain again. Now, I've probably done it about 4, maybe 5 times over the years, but clearly a rookie mistake on my part. I'm pretty sure the reason I skipped that chain was because it was not tight enough on the bar. New saw, I'm still getting used to how to tighten the chain. It was a much simpler mechanism on the old 251, and I'm trying to get the feel for trying to get the right tension, because you don't want your chain too tight on the bar, and you certainly, as I learned out in the cold, you don't want it too loose. What did I break? I broke what they call the chain catcher. Didn't know much about this part until, of course, I now need to replace it. Not an expensive part. It cost me $5.03. And that's in fact what it's called. It's called a chain catcher. Its sole purpose is to catch the chain in the event that you skip it. And that's what happened. In the event that you don't have a chain catcher, as I understand it from my folks at the chainsaw clinic, the chain can possibly skip off and fly back at you. The job of the chain catcher is to catch that chain and stop it from flying back at you. And it's done it every single time I've ever skipped a chain, including the other day. So I just got to replace it. Simple fix, not a big deal. But I learned a little bit about the chain catcher. I used to think it was steel, this little piece at the bottom of the saw, which of course doesn't make any sense. It's made out of aluminum. Sits inside there, and I think you should be able to see the damage. So you probably noticed, I find the old toothbrush is a pretty handy item to have when you're cleaning your saw. Let's get it back together. She's good as new. Well, thanks so much for sticking around today. And you've probably had one really big burning question since probably about 4 or 5 minutes into this video. GP, if the environment is as bad as you say it is for not starting a firewood business, then why is it that there are so many other people doing it? Well, the only thing I can come up with or speculate is that, one, they probably have a lot more land than my little 4 acres. As you folks will remember, the parcels up here are 100-acre parcels, and a lot of folks have been here in a lot of generations, and they have 1 or 2 or 3 parcels. Second thing is, I'd be willing to say that they're already cutting and splitting firewood for their own purposes, so they've got all the equipment they need. And lastly, I'm pretty sure they're not all paying commercial insurance on their assets and their goods. If you like the channel, please click subscribe, hit the like button, and if you want to know when I'm posting more videos, just click that little bell. Have a wonderful week and a safe week with your families. Please be kind, and I'll see you again on the next one. Cheers.